Empty your pockets, boy. Right now, or I shut this whole little operation down. The words landed like a slap in the middle of a Tuesday morning, loud enough for every vendor within 30 feet to hear. Officer Dale Pruitt said it with his thumb hooked into his belt and his chin tilted up like a man who had never once been told no. He was looking at Marcus Webb, a 61-year-old man with flour on his apron and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, like Marcus was something he had stepped over on his way to somewhere better. Marcus didn't move. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't flinch. He looked at Dale Pruitt the way a man looks at a sky that is about to rain, and he said very quietly, "I have my permit right here, officer." Pruitt laughed. The vendors on either side of Marcus went still. The woman selling candles 3 stalls down stopped arranging her jars. A teenager holding a box of oranges froze in place. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. The whole market held its breath. Nobody knew what Marcus Webb had spent 40 years building in the quiet. Nobody knew what was in the back room of that little stall. The room with the gray steel door that Pruitt had already dismissed as a storage closet. He had no idea who Marcus Webb really was. And in 11 minutes, 6 black SUVs were going to pull into this market's rear lot. What happened next would change Dale Pruitt's life forever. Have you ever been told to empty your pockets by someone who thought they already knew everything about you? Let me take you back. 6 hours earlier, before any of this began, Marcus Webb rose at 4:15 in the morning the way he had risen every day for the last 22 years. Not because an alarm told him to, but because his body had learned that the best hours belonged to the people who claimed them first. He lived in a narrow row house on Delmar Street, the kind of house where the radiator knocked in winter and the front steps tilted just slightly to the left. A lean so gradual you only noticed it when a stranger pointed it out. He had painted those steps twice since he moved in. He would paint them again in the spring. He dressed in the dark. Gray work pants, a white undershirt, the green canvas apron his late wife Loretta had given him the year he opened his stall. The apron had her initials embroidered in the bottom right corner, L.A.W., for Loretta Ann Webb. In thread she had chosen herself, a deep burgundy that had faded over the years to something closer to rust. He tied it carefully the way a knight might fasten a piece of armor, because that is exactly what it was to him. The stall was called Webb's Home Kitchen. It sat in Space 14 of the Eastgate Community Market, a covered outdoor market that operated 6 days a week in the Eastgate neighborhood, a part of the city that had been described in newspaper articles as transitional for so long that the word had stopped meaning anything. Marcus sold what Loretta had taught him to make: sweet potato pies, cornbread, collard greens, banana pudding, peach cobbler, a red beans and rice so good that the pastor of First Baptist had once offered to pay for the recipe. Marcus had smiled and said the recipe wasn't for sale. He drove his white cargo van to the market at 4:45, unloaded in the dark, had his stall set up and his first trays in the warming oven before the market opened at 6. He knew every other vendor by name, knew their children's names, knew who had been sick and who had a new grandchild and whose landlord had raised the rent again. He had been coming to this market for 22 years. He was part of its furniture, part of its rhythm, part of what made it feel like a place rather than just a collection of folding tables. What people saw when they looked at Marcus Webb was a quiet older man with thick hands and a kind face. A man who gave extra portions to the people who seemed like they needed it. A man who prayed before he opened out loud in a low murmur without embarrassment. A man who kept a small framed photograph tucked against the warming oven. Loretta, in a yellow dress, at somebody's wedding reception, laughing at something just outside the frame. What people did not see was the other half of Marcus Webb's life. They did not see the gray steel door at the back of his stall, which he had installed himself 18 months ago at a cost of $1,400, which he had paid in cash. They did not see what was behind that door, or why it was there, or what it represented. They did not ask, because Marcus did not offer. And Marcus did not offer because he had learned a long time ago that some things are protected by staying quiet. But let me tell you who Marcus Webb was, because you need to understand it before you understand what Dale Pruitt did and what it cost him. Marcus had grown up in this city. He had watched it change from the inside, the way you watch a person age. So gradual day to day that the transformation only becomes visible when you hold the old photograph next to the new one. He had worked after Loretta died of a stroke 8 years ago, with a grief so heavy he had barely been able to carry it to the stall every morning. He had kept working because the work was what Loretta had loved, and stopping felt like letting go of her twice. But Marcus Webb had not spent his whole life making sweet potato pie. Before Loretta, before the stall, before Eastgate, Marcus had spent 27 years doing something else entirely, something he did not discuss at the market. Something that had earned him a small-framed commendation, which sat in a box in his bedroom closet next to his service weapon and a badge he no longer carried. He had retired 4 years ago from a position he had reached after a career that most people in this city had never been told about, because most people in this city did not need to know. He had worked in rooms where the decisions being made would not appear in the newspaper for years, if ever. He had briefed people in those rooms who ran agencies you knew the names of. He had been trusted with things that carried classification levels above what most law enforcement officers in this county would ever be cleared to see. But at the market, he was just Marcus, flour on his apron, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, giving the pastor extra cornbread. Now, back to Officer Dale Pruitt, and to what happened at 10:17 on a Tuesday morning in early November. Dale Pruitt had been with the city police for 9 years. He worked the Eastgate beat, which he had requested, which was unusual, because most officers tried to rotate out of Eastgate. The reason Pruitt wanted to stay was not a reason he put in any official document. The reason was simpler than that. Eastgate was a neighborhood where a man who wore a badge and knew which supervisors to keep happy could operate with a great deal of personal latitude. His uncle was a deputy commissioner. His record, despite 11 civilian complaints in 9 years, 11, not 1 or 2, 11, was clean. Every complaint had been reviewed. Everyone had been dismissed. Not investigated, dismissed. He had come to the market that morning because the market was in his patrol zone. He had come to Marcus's stall because Marcus's stall was busy, which was the version of the story he would tell later. The real version was simpler. The real version was that Marcus Webb had refused 3 weeks earlier to give Pruitt a free bag of cornbread, and Pruitt had not forgotten it. "You got a vendor's license for this setup?" Pruitt asked, even though he had seen the license. It was laminated and taped to the front edge of the table, the same place it had been for 22 years. He pointed at it the way a man points at something he intends to pretend isn't there. Marcus said calmly, "Right there, officer. Same place it's been." Pruitt stepped around the table. He looked at the warming oven. He looked at the trays. He looked at the photograph of Loretta. He picked up the photograph. "Put that down, please," Marcus said. Still calm, still quiet. The way still water is quiet before it becomes a current. Pruitt held the photograph for a moment longer. He set it face down on the table. He looked at Marcus the way men who have never been corrected look at men who correct them. And that is when he said it. "Empty your pockets, boy. Right now, or I shut this whole little operation down." The vendors went still. The candle woman stopped. The teenager froze. Marcus reached slowly into his apron pocket. He pulled out his wallet. He set it on the table. Pruitt opened it. He looked through it the way a man looks through something that belongs to him. He found $43 in cash. He looked at the cash. He looked at Marcus. "That all you got?" "That's my lunch money for the week," Marcus said. Pruitt made a sound that was not quite a laugh. He reached into the wallet and removed the $43. He folded the bills. He put them in his own shirt pocket. He said, "Consider this a permit renewal fee." He said it like he was being generous. Marcus said nothing. He watched Pruitt's hands. He watched the money disappear into the shirt pocket. He watched Pruitt turn to walk away, and then Pruitt stopped. He turned back. He looked at the apron, at the initials in the bottom corner, LAW. "What's this?" he said. "My wife's initials," Marcus said. "She made that apron." Pruitt took the photograph of Loretta off the table. He dropped it on the ground. He stepped on it. He stepped on it the way you step on something you want to make sure is destroyed, with his full weight, heel first, and the glass cracked and the frame bent, and the photograph inside, Loretta in the yellow dress, laughing at something outside the frame, was pressed into the concrete of the market floor. Marcus did not move. He looked at the broken photograph. He looked at Pruitt. His hands were at his sides. His face was still. "Have a good morning," Pruitt said. And he walked away. 3 things happened in the next 4 minutes that Pruitt did not see because he had already moved to the far end of the market. The first was that Keisha Monroe, the candle vendor 3 stalls down, had her phone out from the moment Pruitt had said, "Empty your pockets." She had been recording. Not streaming, recording, because Keisha had learned from experience that streaming gave people time to interfere. She had 11 minutes of footage in 4K resolution, including the money going into the shirt pocket, including the photograph hitting the ground, including the heel coming down. The second was that Marcus Webb, moving without any visible hurry, walked to the gray steel door at the back of his stall. He opened it with a key from his key ring. He went inside. He was in there for approximately 90 seconds. The third was that his phone, which he set on the counter before he went through the door, received a text from a number saved in his contacts only as DC. It said, 5 minutes out, back entrance. Now, before I tell you what was behind that door and what came through the back entrance, I need to tell you about a morning 40 years ago. Because this is where Marcus Webb really begins, and because you cannot understand the end without understanding the beginning. Marcus was 21 years old the summer his father was arrested. His father, James Webb, had been a postal worker and a community organizer in Eastgate for 30 years. He had organized rent strikes. He had registered voters. He had filed complaints against city contractors who were overcharging the neighborhood. He had done all of this legally, carefully, with documentation. And in the summer of Marcus's 21st year, 2 officers had come to the house on Delmar Street and arrested James Webb for a crime Marcus knew his father had not committed. A bribery charge that rested on the testimony of one man, a city inspector with his own problems and his own motivations. James Webb spent 14 months in pretrial detention. He died of a cardiac event in the county jail, 17 days before his trial was scheduled to begin. He never went home. He never sat at the kitchen table again. He never saw Marcus graduate. Marcus was sitting in that courtroom the day the charges were formally dismissed, posthumously, uselessly, when the judge read the words into the record in a flat voice that did not suggest he understood what those words meant to the people sitting in the gallery. Marcus looked at the word on the page, and he made a decision. He was going to spend his life building something that could not be dismissed. He did not do it loudly. He did not do it in a way that announced itself. He studied. He worked. He applied for positions that seemed beyond him and then proved that they were not. He moved through agencies and departments and clearance levels with the same patience his father had brought to everything. The patience of a man who knows that the most important work is the work no one is watching. He built a career in federal law enforcement that lasted 27 years, rising through ranks that most people in the Eastgate market would not have believed a man from Delmar Street could reach. He had been offered a promotion that would have required him to relocate. He turned it down. He retired instead at 61, with a record that his supervisors described in language that did not fit easily into civilian vocabulary. And he came home to Eastgate. He reopened the stall. He made Loretta's recipes. He prayed before he opened. He gave the pastor extra cornbread. And 14 months ago, because he had not fully left that other world behind, because people who trust you do not stop trusting you just because you hand in your credentials, he had been asked to do one more thing, one quiet thing, a thing that required a location that no one would look at twice, a thing that required a gray steel door and 90 seconds of daily access and a contact saved in his phone only as DC. The back room behind Marcus Webb's stall was a secure communications relay point for a federal operation that had been running for 11 months. The operation had a name. That name was classified. What was not classified, what would eventually become public record, was its target. A network of municipal corruption stretching across 4 precincts in this city, touching 63 officers, 14 civilian employees, and 3 elected officials. An operation that had been, for 11 months, running its wire traffic through a gray steel door in the back of a sweet potato pie stall in the Eastgate Community Market. The contact saved as DC was not a person's name. It was an abbreviation. It stood for Director, Criminal Division, Federal Bureau of Investigation. His name was Raymond Cole. He was 54 years old. He had held his current position for 6 years. He had a reputation inside the Bureau for 2 things: a memory that retained case details with near-perfect fidelity, and a temper that he kept so carefully controlled that the few times it had broken through, people who witnessed it described the experience the way people describe experiencing weather. He had driven himself to the market that morning, no motorcade, no advance team, because the operation was at a stage where visibility was a liability, and he had personally decided to handle the final relay retrieval. He had parked in the rear lot. He had been in the back room when Pruitt began his confrontation at the stall. He had heard everything through the interior door. Everything. He had listened to "Empty Your Pockets, Boy." He had listened to the money being taken. He had listened to the photograph being dropped and the glass cracking under a boot heel. He had stayed in the room because coming out before the moment was right would have been tactically wrong, and Raymond Cole had not reached his position by doing things before the moment was right. He waited until Pruitt had been gone for 90 seconds. Then he opened the door. He was wearing a dark suit. Notier. His FBI credentials were clipped to his breast pocket, visible immediately. Behind him, through the rear entrance of the market, 6 black SUVs had pulled into the lot. 12 agents in tactical vests had begun moving through the market in pairs, moving with the particular economy of motion that comes from very specific training and very clear orders. Pruitt was at the far end of the market when he heard the commotion behind him. He turned. He saw the agents. He saw the SUVs through the rear entrance. He saw people stepping back. He began to move toward what was happening because his instinct was that this was something he could be useful in. Then he saw Marcus Webb standing next to the man in the dark suit, and the man in the dark suit was looking directly at him. Pruitt's face went white, not pale, white. Raymond Cole did not raise his voice. He had not raised his voice in a professional context in 11 years, and he was not going to break that record today. He simply stood next to Marcus Webb and waited for Pruitt to cross the distance between them, which Pruitt did, because he had not yet understood, and sometimes the legs carry a person toward a thing the mind has not yet agreed to approach. When Pruitt was 6 feet away, Cole said, "Officer Pruitt, I'm Director Raymond Cole. I believe you have something that belongs to Mr. Webb." The candle woman, Keisha, had her phone out again. She was streaming now. She had started streaming 30 seconds ago when the SUVs pulled in, because she understood what she was watching, and she understood that the world needed to watch it with her. Pruitt's hand went to his shirt pocket. His hand was shaking. It was not trembling. It was shaking the way a hand shakes when the nervous system receives information the brain has not caught up to. He removed $43. He held them out. Marcus Webb took them, folded them, placed them in his apron pocket. He did not say thank you to Pruitt. There was no reason to. "You extorted a federal asset," Cole said. "You committed theft under color of law. You destroyed personal property, and you did all of it in a location that has been under federal surveillance for 11 months. He paused. "The camera in that corner has been running since February." Pruitt looked at the corner Cole indicated. There was nothing visible there that looked like a camera, which was the point. "You want to know the part that really matters?" Cole continued. "You're not the target, but you just made yourself evidence." Pruitt said something. It is not worth repeating because it was not coherent. His body seemed to be receiving signals from several different systems simultaneously, none of which were coordinating effectively. 2 agents in tactical vests came to stand on either side of him. They were not rough. They did not need to be. Marcus Webb picked up Loretta's photograph from the ground. The glass was cracked across one corner. The frame was bent. The photograph inside, Loretta in the yellow dress, laughing, was intact. He held it the way you hold something precious. He held it for a moment. Then he set it carefully against the warming oven in its place, and he turned back to his warming trays because he still had customers to serve, and the sweet potato pies did not keep themselves warm. Keisha Monroe's stream had 9,000 viewers by the time Pruitt was placed in the back of a vehicle. It had 200,000 by the end of the hour. By midnight, it had been viewed 11 million times. By the following morning, the number was 23 million. The title of the stream, which Keisha had typed with one thumb while holding the phone steady with her other hand, was "Cop stole money from my neighbor." What happened next? That was all. That was enough. The hashtag that emerged from the comments in the first hour was 4 words: "Know your place, officer." It was a direct quotation from the reports that Keisha's video had surfaced. The 11 civilian complaints, all dismissed, several of which contained witnesses reporting that Pruitt had used that exact phrase. "Know your place." He had said it to Marcus Webb 3 weeks earlier when Marcus had declined to give him the cornbread. He had said it to others before that. The Internal Affairs investigation opened before noon that day. It was not opened by the department. It was opened by the United States Department of Justice, which had been informed of the incident by Director Cole personally in a phone call that lasted 4 minutes. The department's first statement, released at 2 in the afternoon, described the incident as being reviewed through standard procedures. By 6 in the evening, that statement had been replaced by a second one, which described Pruitt's actions as a serious breach of conduct warranting immediate administrative leave. By 9 that night, there was a third statement, which did not use the words administrative leave at all, and which contained the phrase termination proceedings. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, the civilian complaint files, all 11 of them, all previously dismissed, had been formally reopened. The deputy commissioner, Pruitt's uncle, had been placed on leave pending a review of his role in the dismissal process. That review was conducted by an external oversight body. It took 6 weeks. The results were not ambiguous. The extortion charge was filed by the end of the month. Theft under color of law. Official misconduct. Evidence tampering in connection with the 11 dismissed complaints, 3 of which it emerged contained documentation that had been altered. That last charge carried a sentence range that Pruitt's attorney, when he first heard it, sat quietly with for a very long moment before he spoke. The federal operation that Marcus's back room had supported concluded its active phase 2 weeks after the Market incident. The results were announced in a joint press conference that Marcus did not attend because he had a stall to run and the press conference was on a Tuesday morning and Tuesday mornings were busy. The announcement detailed 63 officers, 14 civilian employees, and 3 elected officials. The indictments ran to 412 pages. The deputy commissioner was among those charged. He had not known about the extortion. That was confirmed, and it did not help him because what he was charged with was unrelated to Pruitt and substantially more serious. Keisha Monroe was invited to speak at a city council hearing on police conduct that was convened in December, 6 weeks after the Market incident. She had never spoken at a city council hearing before. She had been selling candles at the Market for 7 years. She brought her phone with her, and she played 11 seconds of the video, just the moment the money went into the pocket, and she said, "This is what we have been trying to tell you for a long time." She said it the way Marcus Webb said things, without raising her voice. The council chamber was very quiet. The city entered into a consent decree with the federal government in March of the following year. The decree ran to 60 pages. It mandated the external review of every civilian complaint dismissed in the previous 10 years. It mandated body camera requirements that the department had resisted for years. It mandated community oversight structures with actual authority. It took a deputy superintendent 18 months to implement. She said in an interview that the hardest part was not the policy. The hardest part was helping people believe that this time the policy would hold. "We are building something that has to last," she said, "because the people who needed it the first time deserved it then.